Welcome to the Long Game Culture Podcast. I'm Victoria Puente-Peters, and I'm here with my colleagues, Phillips and SaJade Miller. We started this podcast because we recognize that the U.S. is very divided right now. Too often, we're focusing on our differences rather than our shared humanity. We want to evaluate that problem and explore solutions together.
Yeah, this podcast is really about setting a vision for unity in a divided time in our country. And we invite you, the viewers, the listeners, to embark on this journey with us as we deconstruct culture and division in this country and try to search for a path for unity. We're not here trying to rage bait anyone.
Indeed, we are here to build trust, really want to be able to create dialogue and dream of a better future together. So let's begin our time together with a question. What are you most concerned about regarding the current cultural climate in the U.S.? And what do you hope we are able to accomplish through this Long Game Culture podcast? And so, Victoria, I'm going to begin that with you.
So I'm not going to lie, I am concerned when I hear people talking about things like the C word, Civil War.
Yeah, because the C word is different. So
yeah.
Got to clarify that.
It's the W word that's the issue. Civil is
W,
okay.
Yeah. I am very concerned when that is actually, it seems to some that is becoming more and more a possible reality. Don't know what that would look like in this day and age, but what I hope for this podcast is for us to be one of the hopefully many voices that start to reach across the aisle and look at things that we have in common, basically, so that we can work towards unity rather than continuing to let social media and traditional media divide us even further.
That's right. And you said reach across the aisle. I don't even know if we have an aisle anymore. It's more like an iron curtain, right? To use another metaphor. In these times, the biggest thing that challenges me, I'm concerned about, is the inability to disagree with our own base and our opinions be respected and valued. It's like if you are not a hard line party platform follower, then you're somehow othered, and even in your own party. And I think there are things that either side do very, very well and things that they need to really improve on. So I think there's some strengths and vulnerabilities everywhere. But I think the inability for us to have discussion and rich debate without coming to blows or talking about the CW word is really troubling for me. It's a race to the extremes where no one who seems to have a varied or nuanced approach at viewing things is really valued anymore. Your ability to be seen on a political scene or otherwise or be a true advocate is dependent upon how extreme you are. And I think that's nonsense. I think there are a lot of things that we have in common. And I think we ought to seek to really understand how might we chart a better path that is more inclusive and more understanding of each other's needs and each other's positions. And I think we can be right or we can be wrong, but that doesn't mean we have to tear each other down in the process. So I hope that this is a platform for an exchange of nuanced vantage points about the issues of our country, of our communities, and a way to really work together and be a model to showcase how we can agree and how we can disagree and how either way we can really put humanity first.
Yeah, man. And you're using a word that I love so much, nuance, the middle, the gray area, because things aren't always black and white and cut and dry. Most things are not, in my opinion. We're messy. Humanity is messy. Human beings are messy. We're flawed. We go through experiences. We sit here today, even us three, as a collection of our experiences that got us here. You didn't just wake up as brilliant as you are today. It took things along the way to get to this point of even this unfinished product that we got sitting here with one another right now. And most times, if people are able to sit down with one another, to actually dissect a little bit, or at least dive in, not dissect in a negative sense, but dive into how a person comes to the conclusions they come to. Even those in the extreme, there were things along the way that got them to their point to where they now have these belief systems, where they feel like this is the right way for them, right? But most times, we're presented with alternative information, factual, which is a whole nother thing we have to get into, what is truth and all these things, right? But presented with new information, most people can ascertain that, grow, evolve, take something from it. So for me, we're talking about this hope of what we're doing here. I hope that, you said earlier that I hope that this is not another rage baiting, gotcha, headline grabbing type medium that we're doing here, but that we actually can take those things that are the click headline topic that people are doing and saying, well, what if there's just more to it on either side of it? Because really the majority of us are going to fall into the middle
That's right.
of what that sensationalized topic may look like.
If you look at the headline, everybody is angry. It's the left versus the right. And people are not talking anymore the way that, I feel like we used to talk to each other, but I'm not sure if we ever really did. But we're basically shouting into the void and not having the difficult conversations that it's going to take to bring us to a more united place. In some ways, it does feel like we've given up listening to each other or having conversations to try to understand one another. But here's the thing, when you strip away the noise, most of us want the same basic things. We want for our families to feel safe. We want to be healthy and have access to health care. We want an opportunity to thrive. We want to be treated with dignity. And we want to feel like we belong, like we're not an outcast in our own society. So today we wanted to take a step back and take a closer look at those things that we have in common. And Dr. King's dream speech, a lot of us grew up memorizing, is that he hoped that one day his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And he also mentioned unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you really strip it down, that is, in a way, meritocracy, which is what the right is saying that they want. While that has become a little bit controversial, that's one example of some of the things that I do believe that we have in common, is that we all want to be able to thrive and have a shot at the American dream, which some might call a myth, but I think that if we don't start by being hopeful and having stretch goals basically for our society, then we won't ever get to a better place. So that's what I'm hoping that we can start to dissect here today, are some of those things that we have in common, and how we may be kind of being tricked through messaging, that who knows who's in control of that messaging out there. But I truly believe that social media and traditional media have, in a way, been, I don't know if they've been hijacked or if it's some force in the background that's pulling the strings, the algorithm or what it is. But in reality, I think it's truly more about our systems and structures are rewarding the wrong things. That's what I want to get into today with y'all. For our first topic, we were going to dive into personal wealth. And Q, I think you had a few things to say on that.
Yeah, diving into personal wealth. So this is a topic that I do find myself struggling with at times. Because when we talk about these extremes, I feel like there's even a warring extreme within myself when it comes to understanding capitalism and understanding the backbone of an American society that really relies on that capitalism, and agreeing with some of the outcomes in which capitalism can present. And then also having this other leaning socialist within me, right, that also wants people to be able to have at least a baseline of things that they're supposed to have. These things that through conversation, it feels as if most of us agree upon, whether it be just being able to earn a livable wage, whether it be healthcare, education, all these things that we'll end up talking about along the way and dissecting further. But there is this baseline that I feel like is supposed to come with in this, I would say humanity, but even breaking it down further, with an American citizenship. If we're talking about in the context of the country in which I'm a part of, it's supposed to come with something, this card that we have to say that we're a citizen of this particular nation, this experiment that we're a part of in the United States of America, that there's supposed to be something that comes along with that. And if there really is American patriotism, and if there's American exceptionalism and all these things, then being an American should mean that you have a place to be able to lay your head at night. You have food that you're going to be able to have to make sure that you're going to be able to stay alive. We're going to educate you and educate you well because we want to put the best product out into the world. So these are things that we're going to do, right? And then you juxtapose that to the capitalism aspect that even though I want those baseline things, I also want, if you're the best at a particular thing, for you to be able to make an enormous amount of money being able to do so, right? And then we get back into the taxation part, which we'll talk about later and all these things. But so when we're talking about the personal wealth aspect of things, it's always this grapple about how much is too much and which one is hurting what. And we've never erred on the side of the socialism piece, so I can't say whether or not that is whether or not that is a bad way to go or a negative way to go. But we definitely lean very heavily on this capitalism piece, and we have some incredible success stories. And we really do see a nation that is being built up that has been this shining beacon on the hill. We have been the envy of the world in these things because you do have innovation, and it does bring forth a work ethic when one would know that the more I put in, the more that I'm going to gain from what I'm putting in, unlike in other systems and things like that. So when it comes to the personal wealth is how much of it is the hustle, the grind that I should be trying to build my empire, trying to make sure my bank account is as fat as possible to be able to leave to my descendants. And how much is when I have enough and I'm actually looking out for others too. And that is such a warring even with inside myself, let alone the borders of us and our ideologies. But even just within myself, I see myself leaning either way at any time. So
We're talking about this balance between the pursuit of personal wealth and the necessity of personal well-being. That's why I struggle as well. You know, there's a fact that from 1979 to 2020, productivity for U.S. economy and manufacturing increased by 61.8%. However, over the same time period, the average hourly workers' compensation only grew 17.5%. The source is the Economic Policy Institute. And so for me, that shows that companies and corporations are being more and more successful and profitable at the expense of the employees who do the work. And the employees are not able to share in that success. There's another statistic from the Federal Reserve data that really talks about how the top 1% of Americans, their wealth grew astronomically compared to those who were in the bottom percent over the last 30 years. And so what this is showing me is that in this capitalistic society that we do have those who have power, those who have means continue to get ahead, while those who are on the fringes of the financial sectors of society tend to struggle. And so I agree with you. There's nothing better than being able to come to a country or grow up in an impoverished part of town or being the first and the furthest, as many of us are, and then being able to amass a great deal of wealth and to be the example. There's nothing better. That's what makes America unique. And I think everyone should have the right to pursue that. And I think hard work should be rewarded. And I don't think all things should be equal because all sweat equity is not equal. Therefore, the economic equity should not be equal. And as Dr. King said, we quoted Dr. King earlier, he said it's a cruel gesture to tell a bootless man to pull himself up by his bootstraps. And I think until and unless we have a level playing field, I think that the notion of meritocracy and the notion of true capitalism in this country was always going to have a system of the have and the have nots because the entry point is not the same. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but as it relates to personal wealth, statistics consistently show that Black and brown people are earning less year over year than other members of society. I don't know the cause. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying it is. There's a disproportionate number of people who are of darker hue, darker complected individuals, African American, Hispanics, Latino, depending on the phrase you want to use, who are below the poverty line than they are with their white counterparts. It's not to say that white people should give their money away or we should blame them and make them feel bad about it. No, go for it. I applaud you. But until and unless we address the reality that the starting point is not equal, we can't really say we want to strive to be a capitalistic society when it disproportionately affects to their detriment people who come from nothing. And so I think it's a balance between how can we ensure a kind and unifying economy that does reward hard work, but doesn't withhold opportunities for the poor to the extent to where everybody truly can, in a generation, overcome whatever financial barrier or hardship that their family has historically had We have to figure out a way to think differently about that. And the statistics right now, the facts are showing that this experiment in capitalism is great when it's
Sure.
great,
Yeah.
but it is having horrible effects on the poor when they don't have the opportunity. So I don't know what the
Absolutely.
answer is, but
Well,
So-
I say this, and Victoria, I want you to get in here. So this is super quick. Just one of the very easy layup answers to me, at least, is even just raising the minimum wage. We have to adjust for that. There's a new context to living. There's new cost of living. Technology has grown. Housing is different. And yet we've kept the minimum wage stagnant. And again, with this thing that's supposed to come along with it, with one being an American, right, is that if I think that the fundamental thing needs to be that it comes along with something, and that is if you go to work every day, you're able to make a wage that is at least going to be livable, right? In the example of you'll be able to afford transportation. Now, whether that be you can just at least utilize public transportation and things that we have, whether you can buy a small car, whether you can buy a Ferrari, different things, but that's the capitalism part, right? Work hard enough, earn enough money, get your Ferrari, great. But at the very minimum, you're going to have enough to be able to get to work every day.
right.
Right. So it's just these fundamental baselines that we need to even take a look at and adjust to even start whether or not we got a level playing field for one to be able to spring from into that American dream. But Victoria, love to hear more of what you got to say about that.
Well, if you look at the facts, you're absolutely right that the Black and brown population, percentage wise, are more disadvantaged. I would say, though, that we can create systems that raise everyone in the lower class up at the same time. And I think that the big pushback is, well, there are poor white people too.
Absolutely.
And you both talked about a baseline of where to start. Does everyone have the right in your minds to start at that baseline?
Basic human right.
Yes.
Maslow's hierarchy of need does not account for color or race.
Yes.
Everyone deserves to have their basic needs met. Yes.
Because even when I talk about the minimum wage, I'll talk about the minimum wage, period. I say the minimum wage for Black folk. Everyone should be at this baseline of making this. Then if you want meritocracy to begin to take hold in some way, can we at least all start at some point to where we know that if you want me to go get a job, you want me to get off of this system, whoever the you is in this is, right? Then if I go get this job and I go to work every day, can I at least make enough to where I know I can afford the place I'm going to stay in?
Yeah.
Or make enough to be able to not just go to work to have a roof over my head and worry about how I'm even getting myself there every day, or if I'm gonna be able to eat at night. Like, can I make the type of wage that at least I know the basic needs are going to be covered? Maybe I can't go to the movies. Maybe I can't get a pair of Jordans, but I dang sure can sleep every night and I can eat and I can get to where I need to go. Like these basic things. And that's regardless of color.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that when people hear statements pointing out the disparity from the white poor and the people of color who are poor, sometimes they just hear, well, then that means you only want the people of color to be raised up. And that is not what we're saying at all. We're saying that everyone has those basic rights. And, we're being told basically that it's each other's fault and like a race war or the left versus the right, when really I feel like it's that trickle down economics failed. They're failing to take that profit and redistribute it to the employees. We see that with some of these big corporations. Looking back through some of the main things that could have contributed to the failure of trickle down economics, some people point to when they allowed companies to buy back their own stocks. They are taking that profit and they're investing it back into the company, not necessarily into the employees.
When you allude to trickle down economics, a phrase that, if I'm not mistaken, was popularized by President Reagan.
That's right.
Right? And understanding that the better we do at the top, the more lucrative companies are, big business, the more jobs they're going to be able to create. All this money is going to trickle down to our lower class of society and everyone's going to prosper. Are you talking about the idea of trickle down economics? Or are you talking about the exact policies from President Reagan? Because I would argue that we've had Democrats and Republican presidents since Reagan. We can do the Googles and figure out when the last time minimum wage was raised. There's been Democrats and Republicans in office since the last time this has happened, and we still sitting where we sitting. So
yeah, no, minimum wage is one thing, and then there's also like giving tax breaks to the corporations and things like that so that they can reinvest in their company, create more jobs, and ideally give profits, distribute the profits to the employees. But what we find is that they are giving these enormous $1 million bonuses to executives for cutting the workforce, and they're just not taking that profit and necessarily raising up everybody from the janitor, increasing their salary, to those executives. And I think that that is a failure if that's what they're doing with it. But I think that when it's a public company and CEOs are responsible to their shareholders and their board of directors to constantly be increasing profit, some of these systems and approaches to capitalism are the problem. I'm a big fan of conscious capitalism, or like a do no harm capitalism, which is probably its own separate episode, but I would
love to know more about this conscious capitalism.
It's just the idea that we can't let capitalism get out of control to the point where they're not centering people anymore. It's just purely about profit, no matter whether or not we're seeing these extreme disparities between the 1% and the rest of us.
This topic is fascinating. And I think the reality is we have to determine what our identity is as a nation as it relates to economics, because that is not the government's job to police, or is it?
Or is it?
Or should corporations who have worked hard, whose founders have sacrificed much to build and amass this wealth, should they not have the agency to be able to dictate? We're talking about a moral dilemma, and that's the moral fabric of our country. Yes. And I think the one challenge or critique of conscious capitalism is that it puts a lot of trust in humanity to do the right thing. And we found that time and time again, it is not. And an interesting pivot, we're talking about government and politics and personal wealth, is the United States just bought 10% of Intel stocks. And so, wow, you're talking about capitalism. I think that goes against every tenet of capitalism there is, government control of a private corporation. So that's another conversation. It's a fascinating move. I'm interested. I think it'll be a great case study. I think that move goes against the economic fabric of the Republican Party. And it was done by a very Republican president. It's really a socialist move, right? Government owning a majority stake of a private corporation. And you're talking about their biggest client being the federal government, their ability to influence contracts, et cetera. So it'll be interesting. And you guys know that the whole rationale behind it was that they were building these data centers and they had all these government grants, these federal grants, and they were waiting on the release of those funds. And so they were really going through some significant financial hardships and really at risk of becoming bankrupt had there not been the release of these federal funds that were already pledged to Intel. So they began to develop infrastructure ahead of receiving those funds because it's the government. They're going to deliver on their promise, right? And then in a very, very, very unique move, the federal government says, hey, wait, we're going to give you the funds that we pledged. However, we need an equity stake in your company to do so. That is fascinating. And I think when we talk about conscious capitalism, we talk about meritocracy. We talk about this great social experience of democracy. That's really the experiment, right? But also capitalism as our economic engine to fund this experiment on democracy. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this particular move by this president that flies in the face of the fiscal platform of the party is going to lend itself to future debate about government's role in the macroeconomics or the economics in general, domestic economics of this country.
Well, and I feel like you have to be able to have protection from the government to kind of pull a bait and switch like that. And it almost sounds like
bait and switch is
blackmail.
a good word. Because when you described
Extortion.
Extortion.
I definitely heard hostage situation.
Yeah.
I heard blackmail. Yes, I heard these things.
If, with our companies, if it ever got to that point, that would be horrible. That's definitely not a pro-business approach in my opinion.
Who protects us from our oppressor? Fascinating conversations, but now we're at a time for a break. And we invite our listeners to join us as we continue to deconstruct culture and division our nation in search for a path towards unity. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Long Game Podcast. Now that we've had a chance to discuss our first systemic issue of this episode, let's move on to our second, the American Dream. Oh man, that's a big one. So I'm going to pass it over to Victoria to kick us off.
So, one big hot topic is about housing and hearing about the scarcity of housing. Everybody's waiting for the Fed to cut rates. And something that I don't know that everybody realizes is during the pandemic, when the rates were so low, a lot of private equity and very wealthy individuals were making a lot of purchases as well. And oftentimes they're coming in at above asking price. We saw a lot of that here in Texas. One of the things that I've heard is that there isn't actually a housing scarcity in terms of that. We do have a lot of vacant homes, but they are being purchased as investment properties, and sometimes they are held on to, and whether it's a second home or just a place for holding an asset that's just not being utilized. We keep talking about that we need to build more affordable housing and that we need to cut the rates, but I don't know that that is really the issue.
So in the sense of, like you said, about building more affordable housing and everything, because the key word there is affordable. It's not about necessarily building more housing, about necessarily that we have like a population birth boom or something like that, but it is about housing that people can afford. So I'll say I'm the first in my family, my bloodline that I know of at least, right, to actually be able to own a home, to actually go through that process of getting a mortgage, all these other things. Everybody else I've ever known in my family were renters. And even if that was being able to live in the house, it still was renting that house. So such a rookie when I was going into the game about how to even navigate this home ownership system and getting home loan and all those kind of things. But with saying all of that, brought my home, my son is 16, that's a little bit before he was born. So we're talking about 17 years or so of owning this home. When I purchased that home, we talking about in the upper 100,000s, 160, 80,000, somewhere around there, purchasing that home and then doing something now, looking at appraisals now, property tax now, 300,000, 330,000 for this home, which
For
as
starter
as the
home.
as the homeowner feels good. Oh, look how much money that my home has appreciated during this time, and if I choose to sell, it's going to go for this amount and all those kind of things. But at the time, even when I was purchasing for the original amount, that was a stretch, at least in my head. Now we did it, and
Right.
thankfully we had jobs and we were able to, we were making it happen. It ain't changed that much over this time period to where if I was back on this market, that all of a sudden now it's just so easy to be able to go, yeah, 330, $350,000. Oh yeah. But that's the starting rate for so many things now. Maybe there's some neighborhoods where there's some twos and stuff like that. But even going to that market now and trying to think of a starter home and even starting to touch $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 when we're talking about wages really haven't changed that much along the way. Thinking about rent and how that's been going up during that time period. My wife and I, when we first got married, we rented an apartment when we were here in Texas, of course. And we rented this apartment and our rent was $650 a month.
Mm.
And that was for a 2-bedroom apartment, nice apartment, $650 a month. I couldn't find a room right now.
Mm-mm.
I couldn't rent a room in somebody else's apartment.
Not in our market.
Man, so to your point, it's not that the housing itself is necessarily so scarce, but it is about the fact that is there any affordable housing? Can I work the job I work and not be house poor, rent poor, to simply have an existence in the first place, right? Am I working only to be able to say I have a place to live? And it seems like that's where housing is getting with so many of us. But
Yeah, and I think it's tricky, right? We talk about the American dream. It is the ability to own the house with the white picket fence, and you have the families and the dogs and all of the
Or to
things.
own a vacation home.
All of the things, right? But it's the
yeah,
notion that the majority of Americans' wealth is in their homes, right? And so home ownership was a path to changing generations over time, changing economic output for generation to generation. And I think there's a lot of conversations about blame, where blame is placed. But the reality is, and we were talking about those prices, right? So viewers who may not live in the state of Texas, I just want to acknowledge that the prices that were provided seem phenomenal if you're coming from New York.
It's blowing somebody else's mind in California, which is why everybody's come from California.
That's right. And I blame the people from California on the housing crisis in Texas. That's the issue. Right. Don't California my Texas. No. I think the notion of American dream is centered around having the amount of money and having a good quality of life. And I think that the reality is that housing prices have increased 118% over the last 20 years. And it is astronomical. And as we talked about earlier, wages have not kept in pace with that. So it's becoming more and more difficult for families to pursue the American dream. And I think we talk about the history of banking loans and housing policies and desirable neighborhoods, et cetera. And that is a very painful reality of America's history that I don't think it's worth sort of unpacking now. But the reality is, like, how do we turn the page? And looking at data, in 2018, the wealthiest 400 families in America paid an effective tax rate of 23%, give or take 23.2% if I'm not mistaken. And then the bottom half of Americans paid 24%. So when we talk about the American dream, it takes money to provide these services that we're speaking of. And I'm all about free market economy and capitalism responsibly, right? And I'm not talking about taking from one to give to the other, but I am saying, like, some things must make sense. Yes. The reason why my first house I bought when I was very fortunate, my mother was very adamant that I didn't go and spend a lot of money for apartments. You talked about $600 a month apartment rent. I remember my first mortgage in my house I bought when I was 21 years old, by the grace of God and a mother who didn't play, teaching the importance of personal finance. My mortgage was $683 a month. For a 3-bedroom house right here in Fort Worth. Wow. Right. And then from that, I was able to leverage that into another house and into another house and to have other houses. And so I understand the housing market being important, but I also, when I bought that first house, received a first-time home buyer's tax credit of $10,000. Really, it was capped at 10% of the house, so it was just under $10,000 at that. I think I paid $75,000 for that house in 2008. And the house, I received $7,500 off of the purchase of the house, and it went towards my closing costs, which made it attainable for me. Yep. And so the reason I bring up taxation is there are government subsidies, FHA loans and other loans, and you're talking about the interest rate. There are things that go into that the government should provide as a safety net to ensure that, again, the starting point is equal or leveled, or there's a baseline of access for each Americans. And when we talk about the bottom half of American wage earners paying the same effective tax rate as the top 400 families in America, that signals to me that the American dream can be stifled by the availability of inventory, but also by the availability of services and subsidies that make it attainable for families who do not come from wealth.
Well said, brother. And I tell you this, I'm sitting here thinking about the taxation aspect of things and even the home ownership, how they marry together. Again, that warring between capitalism and socialism. That, yes, I want taxes to be able to come in because, to your point, these services aren't free. So if we want healthy public schools, we got to use tax dollars to be able to do that. If we back the blue on want police, tax dollars fund police departments. We want fire departments. We want good streets. We want trash collection. All these things on this purview of, we got to pay into those things for these things to be able to run efficiently and be the best they can be for all of our lives together. That's just not an individual. And I don't want to be overly taxed where I feel like my money's all going towards debt. And I'm not even getting, my family can't go on a vacation at some point because I am pouring so much into it, what everybody else wants per se, right? Just some of those even selfish tendencies and thoughts about mine versus ours and kind of what those things and wars began to look like.
It's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah.
Y'all have talked about the working class versus the 1%. Really, I think I'd be surprised and don't understand why everyone wouldn't be on board with taking a look at the 0.1% and people who are billionaires multiple times over. And Elon Musk could become a trillionaire, the first trillionaire with his new deal that he's working on with Tesla. And we are not trying to say, that we believe that people who are making in the millions of dollars should be taxed to death, but certainly the lower classes should not be taxed more. And I think we need to take a look at how the 0.1%ers are able to utilize their attorneys to get out of paying taxes.
It's because they're smart.
Yeah, they're smart. Yes,
That's
and their lawyers are smart.
That's what
They can afford.
that's what one of our leaders said.
Okay. Yeah, they're smart. Yeah. So it's just like all of this is connected.
That's right.
If you're ignoring the lower classes, that results in more crime. The subtraction theory doesn't work. You can't just remove people who you find are,
Undesirable.
undesirables, the homeless population, and expect that that is going to fix crime. No, there are root causes of this. This is a systemic issue, and it will only come back. And it's not necessarily even the same people. You're creating this issue. Of course, there's some exceptions with mental illness and things like that, but for the most part, if we don't recognize the issue is not with the taxation of the working class, it's related to the top 0.1%. I would hope we could agree on that, but I'm not sure what
And let's be clear. My mission in life is to become one of the top 0.1%. And I don't feel like I should be punished if I work hard and reach that pinnacle, right? So I think it's a yes and. And we're not saying more taxes by virtue of percentage. We're saying fair share of taxes, just to be very clear.
Yes.
Right? So if there's a progressive tax rate that's based off of tax code, then everyone should pay their fair share. That's all. I don't want to be taxed disproportionately because of my success. And I think that flies in the face of this ideal of capitalism. However, I do think that it is the responsibility of those who are blessed and who have means to be a responsible steward of those achievements and pull their weight, pay their share.
So, because I would definitely say, speaking for myself, I push back a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Well, $1 trillion is crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
I
$1
don't
trillion
think that
is
should
that
exist.
number that I would say when I was a kid that I didn't really feel like was a real number. I'm saying it to make a big number. And the fact that someone might actually have that amount of wealth, those amount of dollars they have access to, is absolutely crazy. Hey,
That's the American dream.
But from the capitalism perspective, like you said, I get it, right? Do I want to be able to have the opportunity to make $1 trillion? Sure. I also feel that if I am blessed enough to make more, and even in this position I'm sitting in now, I am willing to pay more into taxes than the person that is making a minimum wage at the moment. I am, right? And I can't speak for everyone's wealth, and that's a whole other, it really is.
What if your taxes go to fund the deployment of the National Guard in American cities?
What I want is I want my funds to go towards the National Guard. And I have to trust that I have voted in a commander-in-chief that knows how to handle the National Guard appropriately.
Very good. I was meddling, right?
Yes.
But yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people are adverse to just, saying like, yeah, take my money in taxes, because I want to be able to dictate now how that is used. And I think what you said eloquently checks that.
Supposedly, yes. And because that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I want an armed force because I do understand the liberties I do have as an American come from the fact that we are a military superpower, and folks ain't just gonna come run up on us like that, right? So we do get to enjoy what this aspect of freedom within our borders looks like, per se, right? So yeah, I want my funds to go toward it. Again, if my car does get stolen, I do want to be able to file a police report. I do want my taxes to be able to go to a force that will be able to hopefully find my car, or whatever these things may happen to be. And maybe it is just a moral stance, but I do feel like that if I am in a better financial position than my neighbor, I'm willing to pay. And maybe that is the fair share. Fair is a subjective word, but maybe that is the fair
subjective.
share,
Absolutely.
right? That I pay a little bit more than you happen to pay because I happen to be a little better off. Now, it's not about putting anyone in the poorhouse, but again, yes, if I do make $1 trillion, I think I can.
Well, and that's where I want to cut. I would cut to this graphic, which will show everyone, like, people don't really understand what a million versus $1 trillion looks like. And this really breaks it down well to look at how much $1 trillion is compared to $1 billion. It's mind-blowing that
$1 trillion is not real money.
I know. At that point, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And when you have people who are suffering so much.
That's American exceptionalism. Shouldn't we all be trillionaires? This is America.
Yeah.
We should all have the opportunity to be trillionaires.
So you can be a billionaire, but like $100 billion, what can that An extra $1 billion.
You
Yeah,
can-
how do we?
one should be able to be a millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire. That is fine. And at the same time, if we're in a country where $1 trillion is possible, there should not be anyone hungry.
That we shouldn't have student loan debt. We should have universal health care. We should have free college tuition. I agree with you. And everything we talked about the American dream, we didn't talk about student loan debt, right? That I still pay, a lot of money for, right?
Sure.
We're talking about, thousands of dollars a month, right?
Oh.
Yes. And so, I think the reason why this taxation question is coming up in the American dream is because everything we're talking about in terms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, whether it be education, whether it be healthcare, whether it be, we talked earlier about housing, all of those subsidies, all of those safety net services we're talking about, all cost money. I don't think we spend the tax dollars on more regulatory authorities and more agencies and increase the size of government. I am absolutely against that, just to say that. However, I do think we increase safety net mechanisms, whatever that looks like, without increasing the compliance and bureaucratic parts of the government. So I know that's a bit Pollyanna, but yeah.
Well, and I don't think that people are really aware of all the things that our tax dollars go towards. The best way that the visual that I get is I was blessed and got to go to Europe and saw what back in the day, they still have much older buildings than we do. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands of years in the past of how things were. And they don't have standards with some of their stuff because it's probably been grandfathered in. Like their elevators are so small,
Yeah,
you could barely fit in. Yeah,
that's how small it is.
Their stairs are too narrow. You could easily slip between buildings. Sometimes the road, it gets like this close. An alleyway can get this close. So our regulations and things that are standardized to have our roads so that there's two clear defined lanes. All these things are paid for by taxpayer dollars, the potholes and the hospitals and things like that. I just don't think that people really understand what it would be like to not have our government involved. I don't know how small people are envisioning the government getting, but even down to our national security. And some of the things that we were doing geopolitically with USAID were actually serving a purpose in terms of our political leverage with some of these other countries. And so some of these things, they may not have understood how they were keeping the world's democracy together. We just have to stop making so many assumptions and really think farther down the road of what will this really look like if we really shrink our government down to what. I'm not sure what the goal would be with that.
Yeah, and even with that, you're talking about what is our humanitarian duty as the richest country in existence, right? And so even that, whether it be the geopolitical aspect of things or not, the fact that we have amassed so much wealth in our country, then what is our responsibility at that point to the world? With that being said, and SaJade hit it a minute about the student loans and everything. Again, the warring within inside of me, here goes the leaning the socialist way. Student loan debt shouldn't even be a thing in my head.
I agree. Amen.
And it shouldn't be a thing because, again, what comes along with this American citizenship you supposedly have, right? It means that I am a part of this nation. Is that it was stamped that American. Okay, cool. That's going to be one of my identities in this world. So what comes along with that? I would think that as American collective, that we're saying we want to put the best product out in the world. We want to be the best that is on this planet. So I want this American person in competition, not in any kind of degrading way, but in competition, I want this American person to be smarter than the German person. I want this American person to be smarter than the Russian person. We're going to make sure we're pouring the most into our people so they can be the most educated and have the brightest thinkers and the most innovative. Then that means that we're going to pour into the systems that's going to allow that to happen. Can there be capitalistic aspects of that? Sure, maybe a Ivy League. We still could have an Ivy League. We can still have a Harvard and a Brown and a Princeton. We can still have a Stanford. We can have these things. But we also have state universities. Those are supposed to be public. Then why do I go in debt to go to a University of Texas, a University of Arizona, a University of Nevada? These are supposed to be state institutions, right? So then if my tax dollars are supposedly going into paying for this thing in the first place, and I'm an American then shouldn't I be able to go matriculate at these campuses in order to be able to get the best education possible? And then if I got a little more money and I want to spend it a little bit more and I want to go to Yale, cool. But there should be a bare minimum of that I can go here and get a great education and still live a life for myself.
I agree. I think it is un-American for my taxes to pay for public education and then for me to have to pay to attend the public education. I agree with you 100%. There's something wrong with that.
Well, and then when you see the endowment sizes of some of these institutions, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you can raise $1 billion and then increase tuition. Yeah. And then you hear about like in Canada that for them, a large loan is $15,000.
Yeah.
My alma mater, I've heard, is close to $300,000 now. And it's just mind blowing. It's just
crazy.
a bit out of control. And this is back to where we were talking about why millennials and younger are not having kids. And it's because if you want to have more than one kid and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for everything from your college education to your home and healthcare, God forbid you have some sort of a health issue with one of your children or yourself. I mean, how is this affordable? And then daycare, can't find good daycare. I hear, y'all would know.
You hear right.
Yeah. I know.
And it's extremely expensive now, isn't it? It's like $2,000 or something, or $1,000 a kid.
It depends.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on where you at. But yes, but having to pay again,
a month.
How much money am I paying to get to work? How much am I paying to have my child looked after so I can work when the system is wanting me to work in order to pay back into the system? Am I working simply to have a roof, to be able to have my kids go somewhere and to get there?
I'm working to pay for daycare.
And I can't even do any of the other, I can't enjoy this money in any way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So Jade, final word on that, man.
I just firmly believe that both Democrats and Republicans, left, right, conservative, progressive, I think we all need to sit down and have a conversation about what the American dream really looks like. We need to prioritize humanity, and we need to dispense with conversation about profit margin and greed for a minute. We need to embrace that taxes are necessary to fund government, and we need to right-size the size of our government. And I think the American dream in its essence is to be able to provide a better life for your children than you have for yourself. And each generation, it gets better and better. And I think that we've talked about some ideas, but I think in the end, left and right, everyone wants what's best for their family. Everyone is proud to be an American. There's no continuum of Americanism. We're all
Everybody proud to be an American.
Oh yeah. Well, I can't speak for everyone. I can't speak for everyone.
Yep.
I am extremely proud to be an American.
Absolutely.
And I have an extreme critique of our current and past American ways and a discussion about what Americanism truly means. But I am so proud. There's no other country I'd rather be in. And I think it is our responsibility to continue to strive to make it better. And that is the American dream. The right to critique government, the right to pursue the best version of ourselves, the right to ensure that our children have better lives than we have. I think we just need to get on the same page about how do we do that with humanity, with dignity, and with regard for the bigger picture.
Come on now. That's exactly what we're talking about. Well, we want to evaluate the problem and we want to explore solutions. So we'll take a little break. We'll come back on the other side and continue with more. Welcome back, everybody. Before we went to break, SaJade hit us with a little everyone's proud to be an American. He then talked about his own I statements, which were beautifully done. But before we go into our next part, which we're about to talk about the quality of life, Victoria, I did want to kick it back to you real quick to talk about that aspect of pride in being an American.
Yeah, because in a previous conversation that we've had, y'all asked me if I was proud to be an American, and I hesitated because I'm just a little disappointed in us and our lack of unity, how easy it seems to have been for us to be turned against each other. And it almost makes me emotional. I'm like having to, we were moving forward together, which I realized we've made some, I don't know if mistakes is the right word, but on both sides, there were things that were done that contributed to where we are today. I do believe that there is some external interference, but I'm just disappointed that we have gotten to this point where civil war is even a possibility, where people are even entertaining the idea of a dictatorship. That part really disappoints me. And, when we think about, okay, well, what made us proud in the first place? Well, we were the freest country in the world. We had the largest opportunity to raise up the middle class in comparison. And I didn't realize it, but we were holding together democracy across the globe in a way. I didn't know how much the US was that glue that was keeping things in check the way it was, and to see. So yes, I'm proud to be an American and proud of what the possibilities were and the freedoms that we had, but I am just disappointed in us not being able to love our neighbors in the same way as we would have hoped to. And that some people are even questioning whether Dr. King's dream speech is even possible. He, I guess, even started to doubt it too. And when I'd have asked y'all about the idea of one day racism being eliminated, it's hard for you all to even imagine that, because it feels so distant right now. And I agree, we're regressing when it comes to the progress that we made there. And it's heartbreaking. So I feel a sadness and a frustration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that I too am extremely proud to be an American. Extremely proud to be an American in the sense of, like, as I think about the history of my people, as I identify as a Black man, and that lineage that I have, and what my people have contributed to this point in history and civilization, the greatest civilization to ever exist, right? We've had other dynasties, other civilizations that we can look toward, like look at the greatness and what they accomplished. Well, right now, to this date in history, it seems as if America is the greatest, the biggest, baddest, right, to ever have existed. And looking through that and being able to see what my people were able to contribute to that, the building and the foundation of this country, much of it not to their choice, but nevertheless, right, it happening. Even a small thing of looking at the Olympics and when it's USA versus the world, and me wanting to chat USA and me wanting to go for Michael Phelps and Simone Biles and the USA basketball team. And there's a pride in, like, yeah, that's us out there, right? And that's our country that's representing and going to get those gold medals and having that pride in that competition. And I do think, much like to what you said, SaJade, about it, I think what comes along with that is the critique that should be available to me as an American citizen, that is actually patriotism, to be able to look and say
That's right.
Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, no matter what it is that I do feel America first, not in the correct catchphrase and what it's become on either side when it's said, not to the detriment of others, but to be able to say what is going to be the best decisions that are going to be made for the majority of Americans. And the majority meaning that you're going to piss somebody off no matter which way you roll. And that's okay, because also what's supposed to happen is that, and to your point, if we do love our neighbor right, even though I might be the one that had to compromise on this particular one, I'm willing to do so, because it really does go back to the core fabric of what it is to be an American. Saying that phrase a moment ago, that if I'm making a little bit more than my neighbor, I'm willing to pay a little bit more in. But that's because I'm believing in the fabric of the whole at that point and not simply myself. That also should be able to be American within itself, that we're thinking about the responsibility that we have to the global world, that we're thinking about being in competition with others and wanting to be the biggest, baddest, and being able to have the critiques. And that's the freedom to be able to say, I agree, I disagree, but at the end of it, we're still going to be able to look out for all of us that's on the same team that's supposed to be the citizenry we have as Americans. So we simply want to say that. So Jay wants you to speak to that super quickly, and then we're going to move into quality of life.
I think you guys said it all.
Yeah.
I think the most un-American thing that we can do is to sit idly by and withhold critique for some blind loyalty of a thing, without understanding that to be American means to constantly engage in the fight for betterment of humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with all of that, let's jump into our next one that we want to be able to hit, which is quality of life in this America. When we talk about healthcare costs, when we're talking about climate and clean air and water and all of those things, So Jade, if you would kick us off with a little bit of thoughts about quality of life.
It really goes to what you opened the first segment with, which was about the baseline level of standard of care and of being. And so when I think about it as an educator, as a recovering educator, as I like to say, I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't become self-actualized. You can't even thinking about it until you reach other sort of thresholds, right? And number one being the physiological needs being met. Number two, psychological safety, well-being, belonging, right? And so I'm all about maximizing human potential, right? That's what I want. That's what I think really Americanism is about. And unfortunately, our healthcare, when we talk about quality of life, I think healthcare and I think about environmental issues. And I think that's an area that really needs some attention, right? So all the other things that we spoke about, we can argue on either side. But the reality is, and of course, I do have some facts here. The reality is that the U.S. spends 17% of GDP on healthcare. And I'm talking about American citizens. So healthcare has become a major burden for our residents. And we reached $4.5 trillion on healthcare costs in 2022. And that's about $13,493 per person. In the most developed, the most free country in the world, the global leader of democracy, that is unacceptable. And so it's difficult for me to talk about quality of life or personal wealth or other things when we can't meet the basic need of being kept alive and having the best health outcomes for our communities. That is troubling. That is unforgivable. That should question and shake the moral consciousness of everyone. And I think it's in direct conflict of the idea of capitalism, to be frank. You have hospital companies, you have physicians, you have pharmaceutical companies who do have this American right to maximize profit. But when we talk about healthcare, it's at the expense of the people. And while I do not believe in government intervention on capitalistic gains or pursuits of wealth by corporations or individuals, I'm not, as you guys can tell, I'm all for that. I do believe that when we talk about healthcare, there is a line, and there should be a big red line or blue line, whatever color you want to take, that says, this is something we're not going to quibble on. We're going to come together and figure this out. And right now we are failing at that. And I think that's criminal. I think that's sinful. And I think that we must do better. So my biggest thing is I think both sides get an F for this. I think the right and the left get an F on healthcare and how we're thinking about it. I don't care what kind of care you call it. I think we're trying to make steps towards universal healthcare, but then we're regressing a bit. And then in the process, the people that are winning are pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and mostly insurance companies. And so I think we have to find a middle road to figure out how might we become ambidextrous as a country, both give a nod to capitalism and an industry's ability to make profit, but also develop some clear boundaries and policies. This is where I do think we need more regulation, more oversight, and more intervention, if not a complete overhaul.
Yeah. I've personally dealt with some of the frustrations recently with healthcare and how expensive it is, even with insurance and like the best plan. I'm still paying out of pocket $200 because the visit was $500 and they didn't solve my problem at all. So I scheduled another appointment. I found out I had an autoimmune disease, which I only found out because I had gone to a doctor of clinical nutrition because I wasn't getting answers from my primary care physician. So I went and got, paid over $1,000 to get blood work done and found out I had this. So I wanted to include my PCP in my health care. Couldn't get in with him.
Holistic health.
Yes. Well, and just a quarterback for all of you. And so I ended up spending out of pocket 2 times trying to get somebody from the doctor's office, first with the nurse practitioner, then with the physician's assistant, and they weren't able to help me. They dropped the ball on even giving me a reference to an endocrinologist. And so now I'm here considering, should I stop trying to go through insurance and just do a functional medicine doctor, which is all out of pocket from what I understand. And so I get the frustration on all people's account. I mean, there's the whole thing of people celebrating what happened to that CEO who was killed. I'm
That's
not rooting for
horrible.
that by any means, but I mean, that shows the level of frustration I think that Americans are feeling when it comes to healthcare. And I don't understand why we can't have a universal healthcare system with still some private options if you wanted to pay out of pocket to get an elective
But
surgery.
the baseline should be excellence, not
Yes.
adequacy, but excellence. And then you can go beyond. I agree with you.
Yeah. It's just, I'm making a decent living to know that I still am questioning, well, and I shouldn't have to continue to pay out of pocket $200 to not get answers or help. And it's just, I can only imagine what someone who doesn't know how to advocate for themselves is going through. I mean, people certainly would be dying. And I mean, even with our parents, as our parents age, trying to help them navigate the systems, I personally think that bringing AI into not to deny people, but into the actual hospitals to help the doctors coordinate. But it's getting off topic. I just
Well, I'll say on the topic though, because even when you talked about that, you use the term PCP, primary care physician. The amount of people that I know right now in my life that don't have a primary care physician, the amount of people that I know right now in my life, right, that literally are making the decision about going to the doctor based upon whether or not they do have the copay. Not about what's going to be on the back end from the insurance, the bill they're going to get. Am I going to be able to pay the copay up front, right? That, to when you talking about, to your point a moment ago, SaJade, about that baseline, right? Because in many ways, we're overcomplicating. Yeah, there's other things we would have to figure out as far as what things will look like, but we're overcomplicating in many ways because the baseline should be, you're an American, you're sick, you get help.
The best
Done.
help available.
The
Yeah.
best health available, because that's what comes along with your card. That you're a part of this team, supposedly, right? So I don't know about if you're in somewhere else. I don't know about if you're in Bolivia, Scandinavia, and all that. If you're an American and you're in America, you're sick, done. We got you, right? It really should be as simple as that. I mean, same thing when we talk about food and all the, again, some of the most fundamental base things that the majority of people just agree are just baseline. Do you want more? Sure. But the baseline should be, you're sick, you're healthy. My son falls, breaks his arm. There's no question whether or not he's getting to go get a cast and get it healed up
Today.
Easy, right? And I don't have to think about how
Yeah.
much is it going to cost and all this. He's going to get that. Now, if he want to get a robotic arm, if he want to get, I need to pay more money. I need to pay. But that arm he has right now is an American arm that is going to be healed, right?
And at the same lens, we have to also think about the physicians, the care providers who are being forced to crank people out, like have timelines, see the number of patients, focus on billable hours. It's become truly a catastrophe, the amount of pressure that our medical health providers are under. Good friend of mine, really good friend. He started off as my doctor when I was a young man, and he transitioned to a concierge practice, right? And what that does is those of us who can and are willing to pay, X amount cash every year to have access to him. He has maybe, instead of 300 patients that he needs to see on a quarterly basis, he may have 30. And you can call him on the cell phone. You can talk into. You're talking about the privatization of medicine. It's a different level, but everyone doesn't have the means, the access, and so how do we get to that level of care without stepping on the frontline providers? I understand the argument from the other side. Well, if we make everything free for everyone, then it'll diminish the quality and everyone will be going for everything. But we have to start somewhere. Now, I reject the zero sum sort of deficit thinking of that. And as I think about it, even as a recipient of a relationship with a few medical providers that can pick up the phone and call and get what I need, I understand the privilege associated with that. But what would the life, and our life expectancy in America is several years shorter than those in equally developed European nations. And I think healthcare access and quality and information is a large part of that. And so we got to figure out a way. And again, I know I'm presenting more questions than I am solutions, but the goal is to really think critically through this to validate and elevate the reality and the nuance associated with our solutions, but also humanity above everything else. We got to figure this out.
Above everything else. But so part of your life expectancy aspect, I also would chime in nutrition on that. But again, a whole different, that's why.
Well,
environmental factors as well.
This is really, it's not just the doctors, it's the fact that our food, you have the same product in Europe as you do here, and they don't have the same ingredients.
Yes.
This is the problem with unchecked capitalism, and why I like the idea of like a do no harm systems, and also keeping big money out of politics in terms of, that's a regulation that I wish, is that I don't think I don't think lobbyists should exist, super PACs, things like that. That's how you're able to bribe I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know if it's bribing politicians
They're one
or
and
whatever.
the same.
Yeah, like I'm not trying to demonize or villainize politicians. I do believe some of them are doing their best, but
Q, you're doing a good job as a politician.
Man, glad somebody thinks so.
I don't think it's as simple as, ooh, all these politicians are evil. I think that we just need to remove that factor of lobbying, these big corporations lobbying to change regulations or ignore safety concerns for Americans that are contributing to our diseases and making it so that we can't then fix those diseases. And also we need to be addressing things at the root cause, not just adding another pill onto, to the point where our parents are on like 20 different pills, because instead of looking at, change your diet, they're pushing another pill. That pill causes a symptom, and then you give them another pill, and the next thing you know, they're having even heart failure and all this stuff, and it's just a snowball effect, basically, because we aren't addressing things the right way.
It is. And so I want to ask this question real quick before we end up leaving the topic altogether, because SaJade said something that begat a question for me like he always does. You said, and it's not verbatim, I'm paraphrasing, but definitely take it the way you want to be able to take it, brother, that both sides have failed when it comes to healthcare. How have both sides failed, in your opinion?
There's a organizing principle that all politics are local, right? So I'm going to use a county that is at the center of this partisan debate in our nation. This is Tarrant County, the county we currently reside in, we live in. And I'll take our county hospital system versus our private hospitals. I think the Democrats are really, really focusing on, we have a level 1 trauma center, one of the best teaching hospitals in the nation, which is our county supported hospital. And I think that we should continue to improve and invest in the hospital, but to be clear. And we also have a very robust and vibrant private and some nonprofit medical marketplaces in the city. And I think both sides are arguing an antiquated argument. And what I mean by that is that I think our friends on the right are, let's eliminate county health. Let's eliminate anything that provides a safety net of health services in the country, and that seek to privatize healthcare. And because the people that are championing elimination of these medical safety nets in our particular county often have the means necessary to afford the concierge physicians and go to some of the private hospitals. And so it's the individuals that we know and we love who don't have access to those that will suffer from the elimination of the county health system and the county health department. On the other side of things, the county health department is failing us. And we want to cling to this idea, at least we have something, as opposed to deconstructing the way it's operating and completely looking at it different. We want to hold on to the bits and pieces of crumbs that we have, as opposed to seeking to create a more universally excellent system in our city. So I think the answer is in the middle.
Yeah.
Let's think about how we create the tale of two healthcare systems in our city, and we deconstruct that and look at it holistically and think about how we can maximize the best of our county-led health system, that is JPS, with its access. They don't turn you away. Anyone can go. We'll worry about the bill later, which has a tax implication.
Sure.
And then let's think about how we develop the best of our private run hospitals and medical practitioners to where they can take their time and provide really quality, deep, extensive functional medicine and partner and quarterback. And let's put them together. And it's harder to say, let me put down my knife and my sword over here on the right because I'm wrong. Let me put down my knife and my sword over here on the left because I'm wrong. I'm trying to hold on to a broken system. And let us come to the middle and understand how we might do this different. The trick, though, is that dying Americans and dying people in this county don't have the gift of time for us who are in the arguing in decision chairs to get it right. So how might we expedite our decision-making process, create cross-functional teams, create bipartisan task force to get this done right now? And so when I say both sides have failed us epically, I truly mean both sides have failed us epically.
So innovation.
Oh, no. Man, it's hard not to amen the whole time this brother talk. Oh, my gosh. All right, Victoria, go ahead.
No, I mean, so innovation
Yeah.
is what you're talking about, something totally new, right?
And another Asian, cooperation.
Cooperation,
Innovation, cooperation. Yep.
listening,
Yep.
talking. So on that note, we're going to take a break. And when we return, we're going to talk about our hopes for future generations. See you soon. So we've talked today about how we really do have more in common than we think. I hope that the audience will agree. But before we close, I wanted to ask both of you, as we look ahead and you imagine 10 generations into the future, what do you hope to see for your great grandchildren?
Yeah. So, we began with that quote from Dr. King about content of character. I do still very much hope that. I hope that for my children. I hope that for my grandchildren, that what we've put into words about the American dream, that is actualized for them, that they are able to reap the benefits of hard work, of innovation, of being willing to put in their sweat, their brain power towards something, whatever that is for them, and for them to be able to choose whatever path of life that is for them, that they just have the ability to be able to choose that and pursue that and reap the benefits of success from that pursuit. And that all the miscellaneous factors are taken out when it comes to that for them. And that is pie in the sky. And it is hard to fathom sometimes just from my own lived experience. I'm 44 myself, and just looking over my mere 44 years, it's like I've known all the obstacles that have come along the way with that. We talk about this elimination of racism. It's so hard to be able to see because I haven't known that world where it didn't exist. And it doesn't mean that every person is racist. It doesn't mean that everything is always coming against one person or another simply because of the color of their skin or their nationality or any other demographic boxes. But there is a real reality that we've made these things matter in our society. So the less of those things can matter in our society when it comes to that life, that liberty, that pursuit of happiness, the more that those demographic boxes are merely celebrated for what they have been in our history, from the contributions that any box one may check has built towards this experiment. The more that we can just celebrate that they have brought us so many different things, that we can celebrate a certain culture's food. We can celebrate the innovation that this people gave us and how we've incorporated all these things into play. Like being able to celebrate those things, but those things not being something that is to the detriment of one, right? That my grandchildren really are able to pursue all they need to pursue, love themselves, and legitimately love their neighbor, to where they can have individual success based upon what they do, but also that understanding that their individual success has to also be interwoven with the collective success of who and where they are as well. And that there is a responsibility to grind, get it, make something. But you're not making something simply in the selfish box, but you're trying to be good because you want others to be good along the way, alongside you, that we have a collective society of goodness, of humanity, of upliftment, of innovation, of all these things, but really that they're a part of a greater team. And today we've been talking about in the sense of American, Texan and all these kind of things, but the responsibility to the globe. And that there is no coincidence that they're in the generation they're in, that they were born at the time they were born, that they have the gifts and talents they have. What does that mean to the greater good of society and to the world? What is their purpose? And that they're able to live that purpose out with all the ancillaries that many of us have had to have along the way. So, yeah.
It's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
SaJade.
I don't know how I follow that. I'll take what he said and I'll just say ditto. And I would say, in one word, Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. Dr. King, he referred to it as mutuality. I can't become what I ought to be until you become what you ought to be. And we're all tied up in an inescapable garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And I want us to have prioritized humanity and rejected the notion that we all have to cling to this box of political identities, whether it be political, racial, social, economic, etc. We cling to these boxes because there's safety and association, there's familiarity, and it's natural. But hopefully the world becomes a better place and a kinder place to where we don't have to retreat to our boxes for comfort and solace, but we can get that from being. And I dream for America to, in its becoming, to be acceptance of change, constantly innovative. And I hope that every American can truly say they are proud to be American, but not at the expense of their other ideological and identifying markers, that you can have both and in this world, and that we look back and say we were a part of that and we're proud to be that. And we will be better and more of that because we prioritize humanity.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I just hope that one day we look back and we can't even fathom a time when the color of your skin, the shade of your skin in any way made a difference to anybody. That it will just be preposterous. It'll be something that they just can't even imagine why. Why would the shade of your skin make any difference in how someone's treated or the chance they have in life? And even down to like gender roles, sticking people in a box of this is what your gender looks like, this is what femininity looks like or masculinity looks like. It's just, these are the silly human constructs that are causing, I think, a lot of our division is assuming that these things are real. It's just stuff we've made up. And I just hope one day we realize that and our children won't even remember a time when something like this was possible.
Well said.
Indeed.
So you've learned that you're not the only ones that are tired of fighting and worried about the worst case scenarios. There's still people who want unity in our nation, and we are here to be with you on that journey. If you enjoyed this content, please like and share, and we look forward to exploring with you on the Long Game Culture podcast. We'll catch you next episode. Thanks.
Cut. Good job, y'all.